is physical geology. I'm going to give a brief summary of chapter 1, and it's a really good idea to watch this video. Even better idea to take a couple of notes, maybe draw a picture. I'm going to tell you the things that you're going to need to know for your homework, as well as for the quiz, and ultimately for the exams. So let's start chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a big introductory chapter. It's broad. It describes sort of the whole beginning of the Earth. And I should start by mentioning that this is physical geology, and physical geology is a study of the processes that occur on our planet that create all the landforms that we see, from volcanoes to rivers to ocean basins. All of these things are explained in this class, physical geology. The other major branch of geology is historical geology, and that is a look at the fossil record and the rock record that actually record what the environments and the life forms were like. That's how we know about dinosaurs and trilobites and all the different life forms on our planet. That's a study of historical geology, and that subfield is called paleontology. We will study it a little in this class. We're going to look at the whole Earth and all the processes, not just the fossils. So we should start at the beginning. How did it all start? Well, it's important that you separate these two events. The Big Bang is the beginning of the universe. The Big Bang happened about 14.5 billion years ago. That's with a B, 14.5 billion years ago. The Big Bang was an explosion of light and energy. The evidence that we have for the Big Bang is this background radiation is still there in space, and the current motion of all the stars and planets are still moving away from each other. So if you roll that backwards, it puts them all into a small area. When the Big Bang happened, it was very hot. There was no planets or stars. There was not even atoms at first. It was so hot. So as the universe cooled, then hydrogen began to form and the first stars formed. A long time goes by, like 10 billion years on the wiggly arrow here, until our neighborhood formed. Our sun and our planets and our solar system formed about 4.5 billion years ago. So that's way after the Big Bang. We formed out of a nebula of dust and gas. A nebula is the name for a cloud of dust and gas. And we see other stars forming in this way today. And so we assume that this is how our star and our planets formed, just like the ones we see forming today. The nebula theory is a huge cloud of dust and gas. Gravity, that cloud of dust and gas is full of matter, so the gravity from that matter pulls it together. As gravity pulls it together, the heaviest, densest stuff kind of comes into the middle, and as it gets bigger and stronger, it begins to spin. We are still in our revolution around the sun, our yearly trip around the sun. That's left over from our formation in the nebula hypothesis. Sometimes it's called the nebula hypothesis, and sometimes it's called the nebula theory. It's called both, and they're both correct. The difference between a theory and a hypothesis is an important topic, though, that you should know the difference. A theory is our best explanation. It is a broad explanation. A theory can never be a law because it's too big. It explains everything. The theory of plate tectonics, the theory of evolution, the theory of cells, that's everything you learn in biology. Those are all theories, and it's our best human collaborative effort to explain a broad base of observations. A hypothesis, on the other hand, is a tentative explanation. It's a first stab at trying to understand something you observe. A hypothesis needs to be tested and confirmed, and then it can be maybe added into a theory. Theories grow and change as new technology and new information becomes available. So, as we were a nebula, we were spinning around and getting more material in the middle, and then boom, the sun ignited. And when the sun ignited, it blew all the material out, and it left rings, kind of like Saturn's rings, it left rings. And those rings, eventually, the gravity of that matter would pull together to form the planets. And as they pulled together, when our Earth formed, that was 4.5 billion years ago, we were a very hot, magma-rich body. We had no oceans, no atmosphere, no life at all. It was just a kind of a mess of getting struck and hit, and the dense material would sink to the bottom. It was very, very hot. So I would like you to draw this layers of the Earth. They're important. You're going to see them over and over again. The layers of the Earth, so this is a side view of the Earth, and I'm going to draw the separation here. There are two ways that we describe the layers of the Earth. On the left-hand side, this is going to be the chemical separations. The chemical separations, we have the core, the mantle, and the crust. These are separated because they have different compositions. They're made of different elements. The core is made of iron and nickel, the heaviest, densest material. The mantle is made of less dense, but still dense. There's magnesium in there. Excuse me, chalk dust. The crust is thin, and it is the least dense material. So it's like a density column of materials. On the other side, this is going to be the physical. The physical separations describe how the material behaves. So in the core, we have two physical layers. We have the inner core, which is solid, and the outer core, which is liquid. And the outer core is a spinning metal that's liquid, and it produces our magnetic force field, which actually insulates us from extra excitable particles from the sun. The mantle is divided into two parts, the liquid part and the solid part. The part that can move is called the asthenosphere. It's an asthenosphere, and it's able to flow, kind of like silly putty. And then the upper mantle and the crust together is called the lithosphere because it is solid and rigid, and if it experiences stress, it'll crack and fracture and earthquake. All right, moving on. The Earth is made of these systems. They are different parts, they all intersect and they all work together. The hydrosphere is all of the oceans which cover most of the planet. And it is also the glaciers and rivers, all of the water is considered the hydrosphere. The geosphere makes up most of the Earth because all of this is the geosphere. If I were to draw the hydrosphere, it wouldn't even be, it'd be like a tiny little layer on top of the crust. And then the atmosphere would be another tiny layer on top of that. The geosphere is the largest of all the layers. And the atmosphere, of course, that's the air, the gaseous envelope around the planet. And then the biosphere is all the life. And that includes humans. And we would be right there on the crust. That's where the biosphere would exist. The last and most important part of this chapter is the rock cycle. And I would like you to draw the three circles because these are the three types of rocks. The first type, my favorite, is igneous. And igneous is made from magma. Magma is liquid rock inside the earth. The second most favorite is metamorphic. Metamorphic is rock that's been changed by some sort of event that has caused it to change. And then the top one is sedimentary. Sedimentary are important because that's where all the oil and gas are found and also all the fossils. So sedimentary are just like the thin layers that exist on the very top. All right, so the rock cycle, as you know, means that one rock can become any other type of rock. So to become an igneous rock, a sedimentary rock, all you have to do is melt it and then let it cool and it forms a new igneous rock. Take a metamorphic rock, you can melt it, let it cool, it forms a new igneous rock. Even an existing igneous rock, you can melt and let it recool and harden and form a new igneous rock. To make a metamorphic rock, all you have to do is add heat and pressure. Not enough to melt it, just enough to change it. When the conditions change for a rock, when it gets laid down, it can change and metamorphose. So take a sedimentary rock and add heat and pressure, and you can take a sedimentary rock and turn it into a metamorphic rock. You can take a metamorphic rock and change it and add heat and pressure and make a new metamorphic rock. So any rock can become any other type. And finally, the last one is sedimentary. To make a sedimentary rock, it's a long process because you have to take rock, break it apart into little bits, carry it away by water, deposit it, and then let new sedimentary rock form. Sedimentary rock forms are like sandstone and limestone. They're thick layers that form on the top of the surface. So take an igneous rock, you can break it down, which is called weathering, and then erosion, and then deposit it somewhere else. We will do a chapter on each of these rock types and talk a lot more in detail about them, but just the overall idea that any rock can change and become any other type of rock. So a metamorphic rock can become sedimentary by weathering, erosion, and deposition, and an existing sedimentary rock it can also be broken down, carried away, and redeposited into a new layer as well. I'm going to just abbreviate weathering, erosion, and deposition because I don't have enough room to write it on my board. And the very last thing I want to say about chapter 1 is the geologic time. Geologic time is amazing. It really blows your mind. It's so long. If you look at the history of our planet, 88% of our history is called Precambrian, 88%. And that's where there was no life at all because it was just a hot molten ball of material and there hadn't been any oceans or atmosphere or anything at all forming yet. So that's chapter 1, and I'll see you in chapter 2.